Thank you for joining us today for another exclusive interview sponsored by Immovet. Help your horses reach their maximum potential with Immovet's line of natural homeopathic. I'm your host today, Aurelian Jermaine. Today we're joined by Jamie Osborne, a trainer with a proven eye for international opportunity and high-stakes ambition. With Heart of Honor preparing for major tilt at the Preakness Stakes, we'll dive into the bold strategy behind the US campaign, what Osborne sees as the colt's key strengths and challenges, and what lies ahead post-Preakness. We'll also touch on his summer racing plans, updates on horses like See Hector and Saffie, and whether he's eyeing new purchases for the Middle East. Stay tuned for an engaging conversation with one of the sport's most adventurous and insightful trainers. Well, great to have you here, Jamie.
The hell of an introduction.
Didn't you like it?
I was impressed.
Thanks. Thank you. First question. What are your plans for Heart of Honor in the Preakness, and when does he land in the US, and what will his prep look like?
Well, he's going to have a difficult prep into this race. He's going to canter here in Lambourne, UK, tomorrow morning, and then he'll leave for the airport tomorrow afternoon. So he will land. He's got to go, because of the quarantine, he's got to go via Louisville. And so he'll do his quarantine at Churchill for 48 hours. And then we can hopefully canter him on the track at Churchill Sunday morning and Monday morning, and then he will van across to Pimlico on Monday afternoon, and hopefully be ready to canter on the track at Pimlico on Tuesday morning.
Wow, that's a very tight schedule.
It's tight. It's not the perfect preparation, but it's the only way we can do it. I think we've done enough work with him here. It's not perfect. He did his last breeze yesterday morning, so 11 days out. But he's quite a clean-winded horse. He arrived back from Dubai very fit. We've been able to do enough work with him since Dubai. So while there's a lot of moving parts to this plan, he seems to be the type of horse that will take it. He's quite robust. So fingers crossed that all goes well. And we won't hopefully see too many ill effects of that kind of preparation.
Sure. What do you think will be his biggest advantage and disadvantage in the Preakness?
I'm not sure he's got one. Look, I think he's a very good horse. I think he was only really coming to himself at the end of his Dubai trip. He stepped up in the UAE Derby, stepped up on anything that he'd done previously. But we'd seen a physical change in him in the 6 weeks leading up to that race. I was worried in his penultimate race out there that he looked a little bit on the weak side, and maybe he was looking for a break, and then he just flourished. So it wasn't a massive shock that he put up his best performance. And we were very open-minded about this trip to the States. We clearly weren't going to do it unless the horse was telling us that he was ready to do it. And he's come back from Dubai and he's hit the ground running. He's thriving. He clearly doesn't appear to need a break at the moment. So he's not a horse that we could ever run in Europe, because, he's at his best on dirt. He's an out-and-out dirt horse. So the only alternative to not doing this would be to just give him a break and wait for the autumn to go back to the UAE to have a Middle Eastern campaign. So by doing this, hopefully we'll take in the Belmont as well. We'll ship him up to Saratoga after the Preakness. And then he can come home, he can have his break, and then we can work back from, hopefully, I'd like to think he could make up with normal improvement into a horse that could compete in next year's Saudi Cup, next year's Dubai World Cup.
So the decision to race him in the Preakness was made a little bit on the spot, it seems like.
No, it was
Okay.
definitely wasn't on the spot. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
there's an awful lot of planning that's had to
Okay,
go
fair
into
enough.
it from a long way back. But the determining factor was the horse.
Sure.
We laid the foundations to come, but really until yesterday morning, until his final breeze, I didn't want to go firm on it, because if he hadn't just worked as well as we'd hoped there, or shown any signs of not being as good as I hope he is, then we wouldn't be taking this chance. But as I say, quite the contrary. I think yesterday he did one of the best pieces of work he's probably ever done. So that gave us the confidence to put him on that aeroplane tomorrow.
Excellent. All right, so win or lose, you mentioned a few things. What's next for him over the next couple of weeks? I guess what's next for the next couple of months, like on the long term?
Well, the obviously the short term plan is to have the two races in the States, and then bring him home at the beginning of June, after the Belmont. Then he will have a break. He's been on the go quite a long time. I don't want to take him for granted, so we'll give him a bit of a spell, and then we'll be working back from a campaign in the Middle East next winter.
That is a bit of traveling. How does he adapt to the traveling? How does he adjust to that?
Well, he hasn't had a lot of choice. um,
I guess he has to.
he has to. If he's
Fair enough.
going to be, if he, the right thing to do is to run him not here in the UK. And when we bought him, obviously we bought him in the hope that he would turn out to be a good dirt horse, and that's what's happened. So it's inevitable that his whole career with us will be spent in other jurisdictions. Primarily for Jim and Claire Bryce, who own him. He was bought in the hope that he could do a Dubai season last winter, which he did, winning two of his five races, and arguably unlucky not to win all five, being second, beaten narrowly in all the other three. So he's sort of satisfied that for them. But thankfully now the Bryces want more of it. I'd like some more of it. So he's a horse that obviously, touch wood, barring injury, can keep going back to the Middle East for a few years. And as a 4-year-old, I would say it's not impossible we could give him a longer campaign in the United States. Maybe take in Saratoga. And look, the dream for 2026 is that he's a horse that could compete in a Breeders' Cup Classic.
Maybe quite interesting. Could you now tell us a little bit more about your other horses, especially your plans over the summer? What's next, for example, for See Hector?
Uh, Sadly, I've only got one really good one, and he's coming to America. No. Well, we had a good squad of horses in Dubai this winter, See Hector being one of them. He probably ran a lifetime best in his final start, over a mile and a half. We're working back from Royal Ascot with him. We've got a handful of horses, some of which were in Dubai, that can be at Royal Ascot. The Fingal Raven is an obvious one, who was second to the Guineas winner, to Ruland Court in the Jumeirah Guineas in Dubai. He's going to be aimed at the Britannia. And there's a handful of others. But look, good horses are hard to find. Very good horses are hard to find. We don't run a huge stable here. So, they don't come along every year. There's some nice horses here. There's horses that'll win races. But I doubt there's too many that are going to justify a trip across the Atlantic. There will be a good handful that will go back to Dubai next winter. I'd like to fill a barn out there, and have another carnival season in Meydan. And hopefully we can find the right ones, the suitable horses that can go out there and compete successfully.
Perfect. Excellent. Are you looking also to buy more horses over the summer, especially for the Middle East?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, it's very much on our radar now, and I can only do that with the backing of clients. So really, Jim and Claire Bryce have started the ball rolling. Now I think I've got a few more clients that would like to do it. Um, I don't know if you ever spent time in an English winter. Uh, the older you get, the longer they get. And I think a lot of us need to get out of here for the winter. And the horses give us an excuse to do that. And Dubai is a wonderful place to be in the winter. Great climate. The racing out there is top class. Dubai Racing Club look after us very well, and it's very enjoyable. I've never taken a client there who hasn't come away wanting a bit more. Very much on the radar for next winter.
When you want to buy horses, where do you look for?
Well, we're always. Are you still there? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're always looking for suitable horses to travel. Obviously, this is a relatively new venture, buying the dirt horses. And at the moment, we're just utilizing the European breeze up market. So we are very reliant on the guys that go over to Keeneland and Fasig Tipton and buy yearlings to bring to Europe to breeze. Now they're primarily bringing them over to feed the Middle Eastern market. So obviously, with the emergence of Saudi Arabia and the UAE, there's plenty of buyers from that part of the world looking for the same sort of horses. I haven't yet ventured to an American breeze up sale. I think I'd be a bit frightened. A lot of choice, don't know any of the vendors. Obviously, they'd be prepared slightly differently. I would guess the European ones are prepared in a more organic way, really. And I think if it worked last year, we'll see if it can work again this year. If it stops working, we'll try something different. But I think the stats would show there's enough nice horses that the Irish, very clever Irishmen, select as yearlings and bring to our market. There's enough nice horses come out of their batch of horses for us not to have to go buying elsewhere just yet.
On to the next question. Is this your first Preakness?
As far as I know, I don't think there's ever been an English runner in the Preakness. I might be wrong, but I don't think it's ever happened. So yes, it is my first runner, and I think it's the first runner for the nation.
And are you excited about it?
Yeah, I'm excited. Look, it's something different. It's not the normal thing for an English trainer to do, but then an English trainer doesn't normally sit here with dirt bred horses. So we're in a fairly unusual position. Obviously, as I've said, the motivation was the Middle East, but this is a nice spin-off. We did nearly win a Breeders' Cup Classic on dirt, but that was with a horse that was having his first run on the surface. We when we took him there, we had a hunch, but we weren't sure. He'd done all his racing on grass or to Peter. So he put up a lifetime best his first run on dirt, but it's unusual, as you know. All the European horses that come out and try and win Breeders' Cup Classics on dirt, it's very, very hard to do. It's a completely different style of racing, and the vast majority of the European horses just don't cope with it.
On to our last question, Jamie. Talking more about Saffie, what races do you hope Saffie will be contesting?
Saffie in her life, hopefully all of them. Hopefully she'll win an English Derby, a Dubai World Cup, an Arc de Triomphe. Look, Saf's very ambitious, and she's doing very well. Thankfully she can ride. It would have been a pretty dreadful situation if I'd had to sack my own child for the good of my business. But thankfully, that's not the case. She's a great team player. She knows this horse inside out. So, there will be those that say maybe we should be using somebody with local knowledge and a lot more experience of riding on the dirt. But, she's our jockey. She's part of the team. Jim and Claire would like her to stay on the horse. We obviously want to. Katie and I, my wife, would like her to stay on the horse. And I think, however he runs in Pimlico, it would be a marginally empty experience for us if we were doing it without her. I'm not saying my whole life is about promoting her career, but it's it's been a bit that way for the last couple of years. I've given her the platform and she's grasped it and run with it. And it's nice to be able to give her a chance in a classic, on the international stage. And I'm confident that she's well up to the task. Saff will do her homework. Like I say, she knows the horse. So I've got no worries on that front.
Excellent. Well, it's great. Thanks so much for the interview, Jamie.
It's all right, no problem.